Chapter 1050, The Fall of Falcon Scott. After an eventful night, Sonny left the dormitory in a much improved mood. The air outside was frigid with bone-chilling cold, but it actually felt pleasant against his bruises. Sonny headed in the direction of the barracks, whistling a simple tune under his nose. As he walked, one of his shadows flew toward the distant ramparts to check if everything was all right there. Apart from the fact that soldiers were miserable because of the heinous cold, even more so than usual, the situation seemed to be under control. Disparate groups of nightmare creatures were throwing themselves against the ramparts, some larger than the others, but it was nothing that the army could not handle. Everything seems fine for now. Sonny was still hurting all over, but at least he was capable of walking without a limp now. The barracks were a considerable distance away, but there was no rush. He enjoyed this rare moment of peace a great deal, studying the city as he traversed it. Falcon Scott was much emptier now. Miraculously, the First Army had actually managed to evacuate most of the 200 million refugees. Now, less than 2/10 of that number remained, not nearly enough to make the city feel crowded. Even though countless people fought and sacrificed to make it happen, Sonny couldn't help but feel that this emptiness was the direct result of his actions. It was nice to see his labor bear fruit. Among the ancient heroes Nephis sometimes liked to talk about, there was one named Heracles, who had apparently accomplished 12 labors. Sonny wondered what that guy would think about defending this damn city. Well, from the descriptions, Heracles seemed like no more than an awakened with a moderately powerful physical aspect, maybe a rather average ascended. He would probably think that Falcon Scott was a hellish nightmare and die in the first few days of the siege. As Sonny walked, a swift shadow fell from the sky, and a black crow suddenly landed on his shoulder. The crow stared at him for a moment and then cawed. "Sonny, Sonny." Sonny spared him a somber glance. "What?" The echo waved its wings. "Come, come." Then it jumped off his shoulder and disappeared in the direction of the government complex. Sonny frowned, then quietly cursed and dove into the shadows. It seemed that his good mood was not meant to last. He glided forward with incredible speed, reaching the complex in no time at all. Emerging from the darkness near the guarded gates, he waited a few seconds for the security officers to confirm his identity, a useless formality, considering that pretty much everyone knew what he looked like by now, and entered the building. Quickly finding his way underground, Sonny hurried to the conference room where the irregulars usually gathered. As he was approaching, however, there was suddenly a loud bang, and the walls shook, a little dust falling from the ceiling. "What the?" Uneasy, he entered the room and saw Master Jet standing with her back to him. The wall in front of her was deformed, a net of cracks running through the armored alloy from the point where her fist had collided with it. Soul Reaper remained motionless for a moment, then turned to him. Her usually calm face was contorted by an expression of dark, boiling anger. As soon as Sonny saw it, his heart skipped a beat. He had never seen Master Jet lose control of herself in that way. Taking a deep breath, she closed her eyes for a moment, then said, "Sonny, you are here, good." He glanced at the destroyed wall, then at her. Feeling a chill run down his spine, Sonny steeled himself and asked, "What happened?" Jet let out a long sigh. When she spoke, her voice was cold and glum. "It's Tyrus. She finally lost a fight." The two of them headed to the headquarters of the White Feather clan without wasting any time. While the elevator was taking them to the ground level of the government complex, Sonny tried to keep his voice even as he asked, "What do you mean, lost a fight? Is she alive?" Jet gritted her teeth. "I don't know. I've been notified that something went wrong just half an hour ago. Roan sent me a message personally right before you came, but he didn't go into detail." Sonny's face fell. If Jet's only source of information was Master Roan, That meant that Army Command had chosen to keep it a secret for now. And if Army Command was keeping secrets from someone like Soul Reaper, things couldn't be good. As they emerged from the underground complex and hurried to the White Feather compound, Sonny shivered again and noticed that it had gotten even colder outside. Before, he had not paid the cold any attention, but now, the fall in temperature seemed foreboding. Curse it, curse it, curse it all. The guards of the compound seemed to have received instructions, and almost immediately after Sonny and Jet arrived, a familiar young woman appeared to guide them inside. He briefly felt glad to see that she had survived the battle with Devouring Cloud, but then his thoughts turned grim and tumultuous once again. Sonny was shaken. He couldn't help but think about St. Tyrus, silently wishing for her to be alive. At the same time, he had to think about what her fall would mean for the evacuation. With no one to stop the winter beast, what would happen to the city? The two worries competed against each other, pressing down on his heart with terrible weight. Finally, they reached an isolated room in the depths of the compound. The young awakened spared the door an anguished look, then stepped aside, gesturing for them to come in. Inside, they saw an empty hall with some medical equipment and a lonely operating table standing in its center. The table and the floor around it were marred with blood. On it, St. Tyrus was laying, her eyes closed. Sonny let out a relieved sign when he saw that her chest was slowly rising and falling. Sky Tide was still breathing. She was still alive. However, she looked like a corpse. Her whole body was covered in blood and blemished by severe frostbite. Tyrus was unconscious, breathing shallowly. Her face was terribly pale and her lips looked blue. And that was, without a doubt, only after the healers of the White Feather clan had tended to her. Sonny could not imagine how the fearsome saint had looked before. Roan was standing above her, not looking much better. He had been severely injured while luring the Devouring Cloud toward the city. Even now, the charismatic master was yet to recover from his wounds. One of his arms hung limply in a sling, and his usually lively face was dark and lifeless. When Sonny and Jet entered, Roan slowly looked away from his wife and gave them a dull glance. Soul Reaper gritted her teeth. "Roan, what the hell happened?" He stared at them for a few moments, then turned back to St. Tyrus. "Isn't it obvious? She lost. Actually, it's a miracle that she was able to hold back that monster for so long. It's also a miracle that she survived." He remained silent for a while, then added evenly, "You are asking the wrong question, though." Master Jet's icy blue eyes widened slightly. She hesitated, then asked coldly, "What the hell is going to happen then?" Roan lowered his head. Then he straightened his back and looked at them once more. "I think you know." His eyes were bleak and tired. "The winter beast is coming, and there's no one to stop it. It's over. Maybe tomorrow or the day after that, anyone who still remains in this city will die. I'm sorry, Soul Reaper. There's nothing else we can do." After battling the harrowing corrupted Titan for 3 long months, St. Tyrus of the White Feather clan had finally been defeated. Even though she had miraculously managed to survive, with Sky Tide incapacitated, there was no one left to stop the winter beast from advancing on the city. The Titan was already moving closer to the largest, and only siege capital left standing in the region. The temperature was falling, and the winds were picking up, heralding the descent of a terrible blizzard. Inevitably, a series of disastrous events was bound to happen. The first of these events, and the catalyst that sparked the chain reaction, was the withdrawal of the White Feather clan from the Antarctic Center. They had been sent here to support the first evacuation army on behalf of the great clan Valor, but were not part of it. Naturally, their first priority was to preserve their saint's life. Even if the awakened of White Feather had decided to stay, for whatever reason, Army Command would have insisted that they retreat in haste. The life of an allied transcendent was too precious of a resource for the government, too. As the clan's compound turned into a hub of frenetic activity, with everyone hastily preparing for departure, Sunny and Jet were left to their own devices. After their conversation with Roan ended, they found themselves all but ignored by the hurrying members of the clan. No one even remembered to shoo the two ascended away. They were not in a hurry to leave either, mostly because neither of them really knew what to do. The situation had changed too fast, and too dreadfully. Sunny felt lost and resigned, and although Jet was trying to hide it, he could see that she was shaken as well. The two of them found a place out of the way and just stood there for a while, silent. Eventually, Sunny said, "Roan is wrong, it's not all over. Even without Tyrus, we still have a transcendent. You, me, Bloodwave, we should be able to give the winter beast a fight. We already killed one Titan, so why can't we kill another?" Jet somberly shook her head. "There's an abyssal gap between a fallen Titan and a corrupted one, in terms of power. Tyrus was not able to fight the winter beast because she was a transcendent. She was able to fight it because she was a transcendent whose aspect countered the creature's powers, and an astonishingly steadfast one at that. Even then, you don't really understand it, do you?" Sunny frowned. "I guess not. What is it exactly that I don't understand?" Soul Reaper let out a grave sigh. "Sunny, there's currently around 30 million people left in Falcon Scott, as well as 20,000 soldiers. There are also 1,000 or so awakened veterans. However, all of them combined wouldn't be able to do anything against a corrupted Titan. Even if there were 10 times more, the result would be the same. Yet, Tyrus alone held the creature back for 3 months. What does that mean?" He stared at her silently for a while, then turned away with a dark expression on his face. "It means that one saint is worth more than 30 million people, 20,000 soldiers, and 1,000 awakened." A corner of Jet's mouth twisted slightly. "Smart." Sunny shook his head. "What are you getting at, though?" The hint of a smile disappeared from Soul Reaper's face. She lingered for a few moments, then said, "I am trying to tell you that there are no you, me, and Bloodwave. Bloodwave is going to leave with the White Feather clan. Do you think they are going to let Tyrus travel across the strait unprotected? She is unconscious and vulnerable. What happens if something attacks the ship? Neither Army Command nor Valor would allow that to happen. So the House of Night will do their best to protect the most valuable asset, which means that Bloodwave won't be here when the winter beast arrives." Sunny gritted his teeth, trying to suppress the blinding fury that threatened to consume his mind. "This is such crap." Jet's face twitched, but she calmly shook her head. "No, it's simply resource management." Sunny stared at her with bewilderment for a few moments, then suddenly laughed. "So what, this is it? It really is all over. What about the rest of the poor fools who are still stuck in this city?" Soul Reaper remained silent for a while. Then she said evenly, "Well, there are 30 million people left here. With the current speed of evacuation, if the winter beast comes tomorrow, 20 million will die. If it comes the day after tomorrow, 10 million will die. Theoretically. Of course, in reality, things are not going to go that smoothly." Sunny gave her a dark look. "How so?" Jet sighed. "Something like that. It won't remain a secret for long. As soon as the rumors spread, this whole city will go crazy. Evacuation queue, forget about it. People will be storming the port and jumping off the cliffs. It's going to be pandemonium." Sunny opened his mouth, startled by her callousness. However, it only lasted a moment. He was just as jaded, after all. If he had used his brain for a moment instead of allowing himself to be rattled, he would have come to the same conclusions. He cursed. "So what are we supposed to do? The two of us, I mean. I refuse to believe that there's no way to slow down the winter beast. Come on. We just need to hold it off for a couple of days." Soul Reaper gave him a long look. After a while she said, "Sunny, you might survive the descent of the winter beast. Maybe I can survive it too. My cohort is gone, though, while yours is not. And your soldiers, they will definitely die. Ascended like us have no business facing a corrupted titan. As for awakened, they don't stand a chance. So if I were you, I would make sure that they get on a ship as fast as possible. Everything else comes later." He smiled bitterly. "That's it, you're a damn colonel. Can't you do something?" Jet simply shook her head. "Once the news breaks, my rank won't have any meaning anymore. Who cares about hierarchy in the face of annihilation? Sonny, this is going to be an every man for himself situation very soon. We are all going to have to make some choices. The best we can do is make sure that we don't regret them later. So, keep that in mind and do your best. That's all the advice I can give." She sighed, then briefly glanced at the star insignia on her shoulder and walked away. Before she left, however, Sonny shouted, "Oh yeah, so are you going to get on a ship yourself?" Soul Reaper paused. She remained silent for a few moments, then said without turning back, "I sort of hate ships, to be honest. It is really a pity." And then she left. Sonny found himself alone, staring at the empty space where Master Jet had been a few seconds ago. Shaking his head, he scoffed and turned away. What a coincidence. I sort of hate ships too. The first thing Sonny did was go find Belle, Dorn, and Samara. However, none of them had returned from the dream realm yet. All three were peacefully asleep in their pods, not knowing that back in the waking world, Falcon Scott was now on the verge of destruction. For now, all he could do was wait. Not wishing to waste time, Sonny tried to go through the official channels to make sure that his cohort was not going to be left out of the evacuation plans. At that point, however, things had already started going out of control, just as Master Jet had predicted. The government complex was in a state of frenzy. The information regarding the withdrawal of the White Feather clan and the impending doom approaching the city was supposed to be kept strictly secret. But with people responsible for withholding it realizing that they themselves would most likely be left behind, there was no way for the truth to remain hidden. The news spread through the city like wildfire. With it came panic. Sonny spent some time fruitlessly trying to get the logistics officers, or anyone at all, to issue an order for his cohort to evacuate, but no one knew what to do, or even if they had authority to do anything. Worse still, as soon as St. Tyrus had been defeated, the influence the Winter Beast was exerting on the region seemed to have doubled in strength. Now, even the robust communication array of the siege capital was having trouble connecting the local branch of Army Command to central headquarters. Even if there was a leader who could bring order to this complicated situation, they were simply too far away. In the end, all he could get from the administrative personnel was a vague promise of a priority placement while boarding the leaving ships. They did not seem to know quite what it meant themselves, but the underlying message was clear. If he could get a spot on one of the evacuation vessels, no one was going to stop him. In fact, this was true for all the surviving soldiers of the First Army. If they wanted to leave, they could. Who was going to stop them? After all, the soldiers were armed, while the refugees were not. In the ruthless mathematics of war, their lives were also more valuable. In short, the situation had deteriorated to the point of turning into complete lawlessness. The government officers were simply unable to control it anymore. Every man for himself. Sonny was slightly stunned by how quickly the city had descended into chaos. All it took was a few hours. There were some exceptions, of course. For example, someone high up in the chain of command managed to enforce the evacuation of the wounded from the army hospital. However, no one knew how effective exactly the execution of that order would be, or how quickly the evacuation would happen. Sonny was reluctant to leave Luster's fate to chance, though. He returned to the barracks, which had turned hectic and feverish in his absence. Finally, his soldiers woke up, emerging from their sleeping pods with confused expressions on their faces. Not only was the building full of noise, but their leader was also waiting for them with a grim expression on his face. Sparing the three awake in a single glance, Sonny said, "Let's go get Luster and Kimmy. I'll explain what is happening on the way." They made their way to the hospital. Outside, the cold was slowly turning unbearable, but despite that, crowds of frightened people were flowing through the streets, some aimless and lost, some full of frantic determination. The situation inside the hospital was even worse. Unlike the rest of the people in the city, the medical officers had received direct orders to transfer all the patients to the port fortress and await immediate evacuation. However, the orders were vague and hastily compiled, lacking a lot of important details and instructions. Aside from that, moving severely injured soldiers was not as easy as transporting healthy people. Some required special care, some could not be moved at all, unless an awakened healer got personally involved. Rattled, Sonny finally understood what the word pandemonium meant. Cutting through the chaos, he and his soldiers reached Luster's room. After a short conversation with a panicked nurse, they received verbal permission to take him away and barged inside. Neither Luster nor Kimmy seemed surprised to see them. In fact, Kim had already prepared the wounded awakened for departure. He was dressed, freshly bandaged, and holding a pack full of necessary medical supplies and healing agents. The young man had also received a very generous dose of painkillers. Seeing Sonny, he smiled stupidly. "Cap Major, where are we going?" Sonny looked at Kim and gave her a nod. "Eastern Antarctica. We just need to find you a boat." The young woman silently took the medicine pack from Luster, hung it across her chest, then forced him to climb on her back. Considering that she was much smaller than the young man, the two of them looked rather comical, but of course, as an awakened, Kim was more than strong enough to carry a person. Before they left, Samara suddenly spoke, her usually calm face turning slightly pale. "Captain, what about Quentin? We can't just leave him here." Sonny looked at her for a moment, then somberly shook his head. "We have to. It doesn't matter anyway, he is in the nightmare by now. If he survives, the spell will create an ascended body for him. If not, taking him with us won't make any difference." The five of them grew solemn, then reluctantly followed him out. Luster was mumbling something under his nose, but the rest were deathly silent. On the street, Sonny looked around, then approached a random military vehicle and used his bare hand to tear through the armored alloy, destroying the locking mechanism of its door. With how many soldiers had perished during the siege, there was a surplus of machinery in the city. No one was going to miss one PTV. It was just that he had no time to request proper access. Luckily, Army transports did not have a complicated startup sequence. All he had to do was override the controls with his military ID, then access the internal computer and assign the vehicle to the first irregular company. After that, the PTV recognized Sonny as its valid driver. "Damn, I never even got close to stealing a PTV when I lived in the outskirts, and now I'm swiping one as an ascended. What kind of logic is that?" Darkly amused, he sent the vehicle barreling forward and maneuvered it through the crowded streets at high speed. "Hold on tight. We need to make a stop first before going to the port." Soon, he reached the dormitory tower where Professor Obel and Bate were living. Sonny stopped the vehicle and dissipated into the shadows without wasting any time. A few seconds later, he was standing in front of a familiar door. Sonny knocked on it several times, praying that they were both home. Luckily, they were. Walking inside, Sonny quickly looked around the apartment, then turned to Professor Obel and Bate. From their expressions, he understood that they already knew what was happening. Bates' eyes were wide and shaken. "Sonny, is it true?" He nodded, then said steadily, "Get your things. We need to leave as soon as possible." The young woman seemed startled. Leave to where?" Sonny spared her a quick glance. To the port, of course. You need to get on a ship. She took a small step back. But our tickets are not due until. Taking a step forward, Sonny took her by the shoulders and looked her in the eyes. Forget about the tickets, you are leaving today. Now go, there's no time to waste. Neither Bate nor Professor Obel had a lot of things to gather, so they were out of the apartment in less than 15 minutes. The old man remained quiet throughout all that time, only speaking when spoken to. His eyes were calm but burdened. Diving from the chilling cold into the warm interior of the PTV, Sonny checked to see if everyone had settled and drove off. Two beams of light cut through the darkness as the vehicle sped through the snow-covered streets. Once again, they were heading north this time, toward the port fortress of the doomed siege capital. Getting close to the port turned out to be complicated. There were too many people and too many vehicles heading the same way. At some point, driving forward became simply impossible. The road was utterly jammed, which was a truly strange scene. Back in NQSC, PTVs were somewhat of a rare sight, but Falcon Scott was brimming with military transports of all kinds. Understanding that their vehicle was truly stuck, Sonny grimaced and told everyone to get out. As they did, a litany of sounds assaulted their ears: the rumbling hum of engines, the ear-piercing wail of electric horns, the anxious shouts of countless people, all of it fused into a cacophonous cloud of noise. Around them, a vast crowd of people was flowing through the congested road, the vehicles waiting hopelessly for a chance to move forward. There were men, women, and children, some carrying bags and backpacks containing their belongings, some empty-handed. A driver of a massive transport was standing on the side of the cabin, screaming furiously for everyone to get out of his way and that he had orders to reach the port. His yells were useless, of course. Even if the crowd of people parted, there was another vehicle right in front of the transport, and another one after that, and another one after that, all similarly stuck. The people moving toward the port on foot were acting senselessly, as well. It was not like they had a chance of getting on a ship simply by reaching the fortress. Most of them had simply panicked and lost all reason. Some had not even wanted to go, but were swept up by the crowd. In any case, the mob presented a serious obstacle to Sonny. Luckily, his uniform had turned out to be good enough of a deterrent. Where he walked, a small bubble of empty space magically appeared, allowing his group to advance forward with sufficient speed. Even in this state, the people were able to recognize a master. Some moved aside out of respect and reverence, some out of fear. This is damn. Sonny had considered himself an experienced person, and not without reason. From the starless void of the forgotten shore to the frozen hellscape of Antarctica, he had seen and lived through a lot of things, both incredible and terrifying. However, he had never experienced anything on the scale of what was currently happening in Falcon Scott. Even the destruction of the Ivory City did not quite come close. By the time the cohort reached the northern section of the wall, he was in a grim and sober mood. Here, there was another massive gate, its wings currently retracted into the framework of the barrier. Beyond it was a vast span of concrete that led directly to the edge of the tall cliffs. Usually, there would be several organized lines of refugees waiting for their turn to use the elevators, and a lot of loader robots carrying cargo to and from the fortress. Now, however, the whole space was covered by a sea of people, all frantic to get closer to the edge and get a chance to descend to the coast. Someone was still operating the elevators, but the personnel of the transfer station had clearly given up on trying to control the mob. People were pressed tightly against the alloy barriers that were meant to prevent them from falling down, and some were even trying to climb over them. Nothing but a deadly fall awaited them on the other side, but the climbers seemed completely crazed. Sonny stared at the startling scene for a few moments, then looked away. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the unbearable cold of the polar winter run down his spine. A human mob was a frightening thing. It was even more frightening because everything had been fine just half a day ago. In such a short time, the whole city seemed to have gone mad. What are these fools hopping to accomplish? Sonny flinched. What was he hopping to accomplish? Gritting his teeth, he pushed forward through the crowd. His uniform and aura of authority cleared a path, and when that was not enough, he simply pushed people away. With Sonny's strength, it was not at all hard. Remaining gentle enough not to crush anyone was much harder. His soldiers followed. After experiencing the horrors of the nightmare spell and the tempering of countless battles, they all managed to remain composed. Bate and Professor Obel, however, looked deeply rattled. Still, they followed too. After some time, Sonny finally reached the entrance to one of the elevators. Currently, it was closed since the platform had not yet arrived. The refugees moved slightly aside to give the awakened some breathing room. However, he could still hear their voices. "Look, a master. You there, officer, what the hell is happening? Please take me with you. Curse you." He kept looking forward, ignoring the yells. Some people tried to ingratiate themselves with Sonny. Some cursed him out and demanded explanations. Some stupidly became overjoyed, as if the appearance of an ascended was going to solve everything. At least it's not as cold. With so many bodies around, the oppressive cold had retreated a little. Eventually, a massive platform arrived from the bottom of the cliffs, and the barrier retracted into the ground. Sonny led his group forward, taking a place near the opposite side of it. From there, he could see the ocean and the port fortress below. There was only one gargantuan ship currently anchored near it, with several large ferries coursing between the vessel and the pier to bring people aboard. The port itself was as crowded as the transfer station, and so was the pier. The situation inside seemed even more chaotic than here. After around 2,000 people and several large transport vehicles entered the platform, the barrier rose once again, and the elevator plummeted down. It seemed to be moving at a greater speed than usual, causing several passengers to yelp in fear. However, the platform safely reached the bottom of the cliffs in less than a minute. There was a walled road leading from the elevators to the port. Half of it was designated for pedestrian traffic, half for the vehicles. That road was congested as well, but further away. Sonny noticed soldiers standing watch above it, carrying out their duty with lost expressions on their faces. Luckily, no nightmare creatures had chosen today to attack the city from the coast. "Let's go." Glancing at Kim, who was still carrying Luster, he continued toward the port. It took some time to reach it as well. The closer they got to the pier, the more frantic the atmosphere became. Some of the people here arrived after the terrible news of Sky Tide's defeat had spread, but some had been here even earlier, happily waiting to be brought away to eastern Antarctica as per the government queue. Now, their chances of getting a spot on the ship were suddenly uncertain. But we were scheduled to be relocated today. Look, we have tickets. Get the hell out of my way. Sir, please just let me through. When is the next ship arriving? When is? The port officers were desperately trying to create some semblance of order, but it was useless. Still, only so many people could get aboard, so there were soldiers standing guard at the entrance to the pier, and a barrier of alloy mesh that slid up and down, letting groups of refugees proceed further from time to time. Every time the barrier retracted, the crowd grew agitated and tried to push forward, only to be thrown back by the heavy gazes of the guards. Sonny hesitated. What now? He looked around, studying the barrier and the crowded pier that could be seen through the mesh. Then, suddenly, Sonny heard a familiar voice. "Move back, damn it. Don't push. If you have a spot in the queue, present an ID. If you are a member of the First Army, come that way. Get a hold of yourself and behave like people." He looked around and saw a tall, handsome man with indigo eyes and hair that seemed somewhere between black and blue standing in front of the barrier. struggling to hold back the panicked crowd. Sonny raised an eyebrow. Pushing closer to the man, he called out, "Neve, what the hell are you doing here?" The man, it was indeed Master Neve of the House of Night, blinked a couple of times, then looked in his direction with a confused expression. "Sonny, gods, it's you. What are? Doesn't matter. I'm now in charge of boarding, I guess." Sonny led his group to the barrier, stopping right in front of the Nightwalker. Neve gestured for a nearby Awakened to assume his position and took a step to the side. He gave Sonny a somber look. "That ship over there is where I'm assigned to. We are going to leave once we're at capacity. Actually, we are already over capacity, but a few more people can still be squeezed in, so." Sonny frowned. "What about Bloodwave?" The Nightwalker sighed. "He led the other ship away a few hours ago with Saint Tyrus aboard. There will be more ships tomorrow and more the day after that if the winter beast does not arrive sooner. But Uncle won't be coming back. He'll guard the strait until the relocation is over. And then we will resume evacuating people over the ocean to the northern quadrant." Sonny nodded. "Figures. Listen." Neve spoke first, interrupting him. "Do you need to get on the ship?" Sonny grew quiet, suddenly ashamed for no reason. Strangely, he felt thankful to the Nightwalker for not forcing him to say it aloud. After a few moments of awkward silence, Sonny shook his head. "Not me. I just need to place a tether inside." Ascended could simply retreat into the dream realm whenever they wished. Even if their tether remained in the Antarctic center, a saint would then be able to bring them back to the waking world, to a safer region. Granted, there were no saints on the Ivory Island, so Sonny was a bit more inconvenienced in that regard. Of course, leaving the waking world was not an instantaneous process. It required some time and absolute concentration, so doing it in the middle of a battle was usually impossible. Any Ascended that remained in the city would have to travel to the dream realm before the winter beast arrived, or risk annihilation with the rest of the mundane people. Still, taking up a spot on a ship would be a waste. And Sonny had long decided to stay and try to stall the Titan anyway. He looked at Neve. "I don't need one, but my people." Sonny glanced at Bate, Professor Obel, and the members of his cohort. Neve looked at them too. His face fell. The Nightwalker hesitated for a few moments, then said quietly, "Sonny, I have 3 spots reserved as a member of the crew. I will give you those. Beyond that, however, I can get the rest of your cohort on board too. Members of the First Army have a priority right to be evacuated, but those additional spots, they will come at the expense of civilians with officially issued tickets. So, it's your decision." He paused and then added apologetically, "Sorry, but you have to make it quick. This is going to be the last batch we let in tonight." As though to echo his words, the mesh barrier suddenly slid into the ground with a metallic screech. The soldiers started checking the IDs and letting people pass through one by one. Sonny froze for a moment, his face grew still. So, his heart grew heavy. So this is what it came to. 3 spots, or having to displace civilians who had a spot in the queue. His soldiers had all heard what Neve said. Sonny turned around looking at them. Kim, Luster, Dorn, Samara, Bell, Bate, Professor Obel. What was he supposed to do? Curse it all. As Sonny studied the faces of his soldiers, Bell, Dorn, and Samara briefly glanced at each other. Then the giant man looked at Sonny and slightly shook his head. There were no words spoken, and yet for a moment Sonny felt as though his heart was pierced by a sharp blade. He lowered his head, then looked at Professor Obel. The old man met his gaze, and the two of them remained motionless for several seconds, as if having a silent conversation. Finally, Sonny looked at the mob of frightened refugees crowding behind the line of the barrier, all desperate to be saved. He sighed. How terrible. Why the hell did I want to be an officer? Gods, no amount of the damned contribution points was worth it. Then Sonny straightened his back and said confidently, "Bait, Professor Obel, you go in first." Bait gave him a startled glance, but the old man gently pushed her forward. They moved past Neve, the young woman crossing the line first. However, as soon as she did, Professor Obel silently took a step back. At the same time, Sonny pushed Kim and Luster. His push, though, was not too gentle. The two stumbled past Neve, ending up on the other side of the line, too. They were one of the last people to be let through. A moment later, the barrier rose with a screech, and a wall of alloy mesh cut off the pier from the rest of the port. Sonny, Professor Obel, Samara, Dorn, and Bell remained on one side. Kim, Luster, and Bait were on the other. The young woman turned around, confused. When she saw the old man behind the fence, her eyes widened. "Professor, why are you?" Professor Obel smiled. "It's all right, Bait. We already had that conversation, remember? Stop being stubborn and forgive this old man. Ah, my old bones really can't endure another journey." She grabbed the mesh, frantic. No, you can't. How could you?" He sighed. "I only have a few more years left to live at best. Bait, I might have accomplished a lot in this life, but it's coming to an end." The old man chuckled. "You will accomplish even more, given time. What, do you think I was already brilliant at your age? Gods, no. I barely knew how to tie my shoes. Letting someone young take my place is a privilege of mine, especially someone like you, or awakened Kim over there." Bates stared at him for a few long moments, her eyes glistening. Then she turned to Sonny. Sonny, what about?" He scoffed. "I'll be fine. It's like you don't know me. There's not a single selfless bone in my body, so you don't really have to worry about my safety." At that point, Kim finally spoke. "Captain." Sonny glanced at her and frowned. "You keep Luster and Bates safe. Who knows what will happen? Go board the ship and get the hell out of here, Kim. That's an order." He remained silent for a moment, and then added, "Also, it's Major, damn it." And that was that. Soon, Kim, Luster, and Bate boarded a ferry and were taken to the towering vessel. Sonny and the rest remained in the doomed siege capital, in Falcon Scott. The air was getting colder and colder. After things were settled, Sonny did not really know what to do. Professor Obel wanted to go back to the dormitory, for now, so Sonny asked Belle, Dorn, and Samara to take the old man there. After that, they were supposed to return to the barracks. Left alone, Sonny remained motionless for a few minutes, then used Shadow Step to sneak aboard Neve's ship. Placing a tether there did not take him much time. After the invisible mark was created, he used the same method to return to the port fortress. It was already night, of course. Night and day were absolutely the same during the long winter here in Antarctica. Still, it meant that the winter beast would arrive in around 12 hours at the earliest and in no more than 40 at the latest. Sonny slowly made his way back to the elevators. No one was moving in the opposite direction of the port, so he did not have to force his way through the crowd. He just walked slowly, moving aside to let vehicles pass from time to time. The elevators were going up entirely empty as well. His lonesome figure startled the crowd of people waiting for the platform to arrive at the upper transfer station. Sonny spared them a heavy glance, then sighed and dissipated into the shadow. He had no desire to travel through the mob again. To waste as little essence as possible, he simply glided through the darkness and appeared some distance away, in the shadow of the city wall. Then, he used a lift to reach the battlements and finally escaped the panicked sea of people. From here, he could see the vast expanse of the city. Falcon Scott was bathed in darkness and suffused with stark artificial light. Snowflakes danced in the frigid air, and above it all, the ghostly aurora swirled like a celestial river of ghostly flames. Countless stars shone coldly high above. Sonny looked at the dreamlike scene for a few moments, then sighed. How come it looks so beautiful? On the other side of the wall was the ocean. He could see the port below, the overflowing mass of people within it, and the lone battleship towering above the dark waters. Sonny walked along the length of the wall, keeping his eye on the vessel. There were soldiers standing watch on the wall. Strangely enough, none of them seemed in a hurry to leave their posts. In fact, he could feel a strange mood permeating the air. The crowd of refugees below was almost frenzied, but here on the battlements, the members of the First Army were almost tranquil. It was not the resigned tranquility of desperation, either just unvarnished calmness of people who had been through hell and did not fear the end. Soon he heard one of the soldiers say, "Look, it's moving." Sonny could see it as well. The battleship was finally departing. The titanic chain rattled as it rose, soon revealing a massive anchor. Then slowly, the giant vessel started to move, distancing itself from the port. Its departure caused the people packed into the fortress to cry out, the litany of their voices flying on the wind to reach his ears. A raspy female voice responded to the soldier. "Poor guys, I feel bad for them. It's too damn cold." The first, male voice sounded again after a moment of silence. "Yeah, I hope someone in the port will have enough sense to hand out food, blankets, and something hot to drink. Speaking of something to drink, give that thing here." Sonny frowned. "Wait, don't those voices sound familiar?" He looked at the pair of talkative soldiers. One of them was a man in the uniform of the First Army. The other was an awakened woman wearing a beautiful enchanted robe. The two of them were passing a flask of something fragrant between each other while idly observing the departure of the battleship. Sonny tilted his head, surprised. They were Sergeant Gier and Lieutenant Karen, two officers who had been under his command during the hellish march to Falcon Scott. He had not seen them after reaching the siege capital. Sonny hesitated for a moment, then said, "Hey, you." Karen flinched and grabbed the parapet of the battlement with both hands. Her face paled a little. Gier, I think I drank too much. I just heard the devil calling out to me." The mundane soldier scoffed. "Ain't no way you are drunker than me. Aren't you awake and supposed to be stupidly tough? Though, I thought I heard him too. Weird." Sonny sighed. "That's because I'm standing right behind you." Both of them slowly turned around and stared at him for a few moments. Then, sincere smiles suddenly appeared on their faces. "Captain, sir, you're here too." He rolled his eyes, then came closer and leaned on the parapet beside them. "Yes, I'm here too." After the caravan reached the city, the soldiers and awakened he had led were absorbed back into the First Army and sent to reinforce the garrison. He had met a few here and there during the siege, but largely, Sonny had no idea what had happened to them. It was strange to see Gier and Karen again. He studied them for a bit, then asked, "The two of you did not board the ship?" Sergeant Gier hesitated, then shrugged relaxedly. No, it just feels weird to leave all these people behind and run away. Actually, pretty much no one I know went and took a spot for themselves. Most of us First Army grunts are staying." He took a sip from the flask and chuckled. "It's like we all made a weird suicide pact." Karen pulled the flask out of his hand and smiled. "It's all right, though. Actually, I feel like I was supposed to die in Erebus Field. That would have been sad." She took a big gulp and sighed with pleasure. "Because everyone there died. But here, we already made sure that 170 million people escaped. By tomorrow, it's going to be 180. That's a lot of people. That's a job well done, if you ask me. And if we manage to hold out for a day or two more, then that's going to be even better." Gier nodded. "That is the reason why we were sent here in the first place, isn't it? To make sure that these people escape. So, saving ourselves at their expense just feels weird, that's all." Sonny studied them for a few moments, remaining silent, Then he sighed. I guess I feel the same way. Plus, I really hate losing as well. Karen and Jeer looked at him with complicated expressions. So you're staying too? Sonny smiled slightly. Yeah, but don't get me wrong. I am not planning on dying heroically. Unlike some people, I haven't given up on giving that beast a good fight. The two soldiers were quiet for a bit. Then Jeer suddenly laughed. Good, that's good. Hell, now that I know that you're going to be with us too, sir, I am starting to feel that maybe there's still a chance. We already killed one Titan, didn't we? What's one more? Karen lingered for a moment, then offered the flask to Sonny and patted the mundane soldier on the shoulder. Sure, Jeer, sure, it's just a corrupted Titan. Let's kill it, why not? Sonny received the flask and took a sip of something bitter, flavorful, and absolutely searing. He grimaced and coughed, feeling his eyes turn wet with tears. Gods, what the hell are they drinking? After a while, when he regained his ability to speak again, Sonny wiped his eyes and passed the flask to Karen. Feeling a pleasant warmth spread through his body, he said, Yeah, you're right. It's just a corrupted Titan. It was already morning by the time Sonny made his way to the dormitory tower where Professor Obel was staying. The cold had gotten even more oppressive, and the wind was like a sharp knife that cut ruthlessly against his skin. It was rather strange. Soon after the news of the winter beast's inevitable attack spread through the city, the whole population seemed to have gone mad. Fear, panic, and desperation were like a wildfire that spread through the siege capital, throwing it into utter chaos. For a while, it was as though Falcon Scott had turned into a wounded, frenzied beast. But now a strange calmness permeated the snow-covered streets. Even near the port, the mob had become meek and docile. A few more ships arrived, and a few more millions of people were taken away. The rest either surrendered themselves to fate or gave up completely. As soon as they let go of hope, their fear disappeared. Their panic subsided too. As Sonny walked through the city, he saw different people coping with the merciless reality of the situation in different ways. Some seemed numb and lethargic. Some seemed serene and at peace. Everyone found solace in their own way. He even saw groups of people climb to the roofs of the highest buildings, carrying chairs, portable heaters, and food. They were going to watch the arrival of the Titan and meet their ends together. Others were trying to get as deep underground as they could. A siege capital like Falcon Scott had plenty of durable subterranean shelters. However, if anyone thought that they could hide from the approaching doom there, they were sorely mistaken. No amount of frozen soil and layers of mundane defenses were going to stop a corrupted Titan. There had been shelters in Erebus Field, too, but no one who had entered them survived. And Goliath was in no way a match for the winter beast. As for Sonny himself, he had not given up yet. He still had some will to fight left in him. He had spent these hours trying to come up with a way to, if not defeat the abominable horror, then at least tie down and stall it. Sadly, Sonny saw no way to win, no matter how hard he looked. The enemy was just too strong, and his bag of tricks was all but empty. There was no time to prepare anything, and even if there were, he was not sure that he would have been able to pull another miracle out of thin air. Killing Goliath was already an astonishing feat. In the past, before the transcendence of the first saints, it had taken all of clan valor decades to slay a fallen Titan. But Sonny destroyed the dreadful stone colossus in a single second. If he had been a couple seconds slower, the city would have probably already been destroyed. That was how terrifying Titans were. The further one walked on the road of ascendance, or corruption, the greater the distance between individual steps. There was a vast chasm between a terror and a Titan, and an even more boundless abyss between a fallen and a corrupted one. So Sonny had not come up with a single good idea. His own strength was insufficient, and there was no one stronger around to borrow it from. Is it really hopeless? Despite it all, he was reluctant to accept that fact. and yet a shadow of doubt was weighing on his heart. As Sonny was approaching the dormitory tower, his thoughts wandered to Jeer and Karen. His mood turned dark as he remembered all the people he had brought to Falcon Scott and how much effort had gone into preserving their lives. Where were they now? The nameless sleeper, the kid who had called him uncle once, the brave soldier who had lost his arm to the devouring cloud. Had they been evacuated, or were they still out there somewhere within the doomed city? Most of the 200 million people had already been evacuated, so the chances of that weren't high. Standing in front of the entrance to the dormitory, he looked at the piles of snow on both sides of it. The man who had been so happy to give him a sandwich were he and his wife safe. And countless others. With a deep sigh, Sonny entered the tower and made his way to Professor Obel's apartment. The old man met him with a calm smile. "Master Sunless, come in, come in." By now there was no one inside the apartment except for the old man. The two of them remained silent for a while. Eventually, Professor Obel sighed. "I wanted to thank you. Some time ago, I made a request of you to not choose to save my life over someone else's. Back then, you didn't agree. I am glad that you changed your mind." Sonny looked at the old man with a bleak expression. He remembered that conversation. Back then, he had foolishly proclaimed that he would not have to choose, because he would simply save everyone he decided to save. Technically, Sonny had kept that promise. The convoy had made it to Falcon Scott, and although there were some casualties, he never ended up having to put Professor Obel's life over that of other people. Who could have known that their woes would only grow more calamitous after reaching the distant siege capital? Sonny pursed his lips and then said in an even tone, "I am not going to lie, Professor. I am unhappy with your decision. After all the effort I've put into keeping you alive, you still chose to stay. It makes me feel as though all those struggles of mine were meaningless." They had not been, of course. Tens of thousands of people, and maybe even millions, were alive because of what Sonny had done. But millions of people were faceless. To him, Professor Obel had long become somewhat of a personification of all the mundane humans the First Army was meant to save. Him and Bate. The old man smiled wistfully. "I knew that you would feel that way. People who are as principled as you, young man, are a rare breed. They can't help but feel responsible for the entire world. However, the world is too vast, Major Sunless. You can't defeat it all by yourself, and you shouldn't be forced to either." Sonny looked at him with surprise. "Now that is amusing." He couldn't help but snort. "Principled me, Professor, you are deeply mistaken. I have no principles to speak of. I am just stubborn, spiteful, and a little bit mad. That's all there is to me." The old man laughed. "If you say so, young man. Anyway, you must be really busy. I won't keep you. However, I do have one last favor to ask. Would you mind escorting me to the communication array? My work schedule is technically suspended, but a bunch of us old engineers decided to gather there. Who knows, maybe we'll even manage to restore function to the whole thing. In any case, it will be an extremely interesting problem to solve. I already have a few ideas." Sonny stared at him for a few moments, then silently nodded. Together, they left the dormitory tower and ventured through the streets of Falcon Scott, chatting idly as they did. Time seemed to slow down a little. Nevertheless, they eventually reached the base of the communication array complex, where a dozen or so old men and women were standing, waiting for the latecomers to arrive. Some of them waved to Professor Obel, calling out to him with boisterous voices. The old man waved in response, then turned to Sonny and smiled. "We're here. Thank you very much, young man, for everything." Sonny felt as though a lump was stuck in his throat. He lingered for a few moments, then forced out a few words. "Don't mention it, and thank you too, Professor. Please stay safe." Professor Obel patted him on the shoulder. "You must survive, Major. Don't hesitate to save yourself when the time comes. Farewell." With that, he smiled one last time, then turned away and headed to the other old engineers. They welcomed him with friendly greetings. Sonny remained motionless for a while, then turned away too. Damnation! Gritting his teeth, he shivered in the cold and started walking. The shadow weighing on his heart had become heavier. He found his soldiers calmly preparing for the nearing, and most likely their last battle. Sonny had chosen the members of his cohort based on their mental resilience, but even still, he was surprised and slightly disturbed by how nonchalant all three seemed. Samara had lost her rifle, but was now in possession of Kim's carbine. She was sitting on an alloy crate, silently charging one bullet after another with essence. Bell was sharpening his sword with a vague smile on his face. Memories did not need to be sharpened, but the swordsman had a habit of doing so anyway. Dorn had been wounded by the scavenger. The deep cut on his chest had already been dealt with by an awakened healer, but he was yet to fully recover. The giant man was moving his shoulder through a set of stretching exercises, wincing from time to time. His sledgehammer was nearby, its handle leaning against the wall. When Sonny entered, the three awakened glanced his way and saluted. "What's the news, sir?" He shook his head. "No news yet. If we're lucky, the bastard will show up tomorrow. If we're not, it will be here today." Sonny remained silent for a few moments, then added, "In any case, we will have to deal with the blizzard first. Keep those charms I gave you summoned. Protection against cold is going to play a big role when the winter beast comes." Sonny possessed the memory of ice, but he had also created lesser versions of the ascended charm for each of his soldiers. Those memories were not as potent, but also required much less essence to sustain the enchantments. They nodded, summoning the artificial charms. Looking at his soldiers, Sonny couldn't help but feel a hint of fear. He had only known these people for a few months, but they had gone through a lifetime of struggles together. Even if he wasn't responsible for their lives, he would still have been fiercely reluctant to see them die. Bell, Dorn, Samara, they were admirable warriors each. More importantly, they were his people. Sonny sighed. "You just had to go and stay, huh?" He had been fully prepared to have Neve load the whole cohort on the ship, but the three awakened silently refused. Staying in Falcon Scott was their choice. Bell looked at him and grinned. "Sure, sir, that's our job." Samara simply nodded, choosing not to say anything in her usual manner. Dorn chuckled. "We did, but aren't you here too, Major?" Sonny winced. Of course, it wasn't the same. He was an ascended, and one ridiculously hard to kill on top of that. His soldiers, however, were merely awakened. They were not nearly as resilient. "Yeah, I am." Bell put his sword away, the smile slowly disappearing from his face. The swordsman remained silent for a few moments, looking at him with an uncharacteristically serious expression. A heavy atmosphere settled in the barracks room. Eventually, he said, "There is something I wanted to ask you, though, sir. You don't have to answer, of course." Sonny frowned. "What is it?" Bell hesitated for a bit, then asked thoughtfully. "There are rumors going around that you're dating Mongrel, but Mongrel, she is your echo. What's that all about?" Sonny stared at him, speechless. "What the hell are you on about, fool? I'm not dating anyone." The swordsman suddenly threw his head back and exploded with laughter. I see." Dorn gave him a disapproving look and let out an exasperated sigh. "That guy." Sonny shook his head, suddenly feeling an urge to laugh too. "He's crazier than me, gods." "If you're done, Bell, let's discuss strategy." Sometime later, Sonny walked outside to get some fresh air. The air was much cleaner in Antarctica. After all, it would be a waste to remain inside all the time, even despite the cold. As Sonny stared at the distant sky, he suddenly noticed a black bird looking at him from a nearby roof. Then, he heard the sound of approaching footsteps. "Sonny, there you are." Master Jet appeared from behind a corner and walked over to him, then stopped, her icy blue eyes full of coldness that was even more chilling than the polar night. He looked at her, then smiled. "Here I am." She sighed. "I sent all the information we have about the winter beast to your communicator. Did you read it?" He nodded. Sadly, there was little known about the Titan and its abilities. Even though Saint Tyrus had spent months suppressing the creature, most of their drawn-out battle had not been a direct one. The winter beast had shown an eerie ability to control cold, snow, and wind. Since Sky Tide commanded the winds as well, their battlefield had been the sky above the Antarctic center itself. It was precisely because the Titan's most dreadful power had been continuously countered by Saint Tyrus that no one knew its true extent. It had to be tremendous, though, considering that the mere presence of the creature was distorting communications across the entire region. All Sonny and Jet could do was make educated guesses. She hesitated. "Good then." After that, both fell silent. Sonny looked at Soul Reaper, remembering the past. She was the first person he had met after surviving the first nightmare back then. Jet looked like an unreachable goddess to him. Seeing her cold beauty, he had been stunned. Luckily, she promptly slapped some sense back into him. After that, Master Jet was always in the background of his life, arguably saving it on more than one occasion with her advice and slightly jaded wisdom. And now they were equals. It was funny. The two of them had only met a few years ago, but Sonny felt as though he had known Jet all his life. Maybe because those years felt like several lifetimes. He sighed, then suddenly asked, "Master Jet, I've always wanted to ask, why did you really join the government? Considering your abilities and character, the legacy clans probably showered you with offers, and incredible ones at that. Hell, you must have received a special strategic asset designation as well." They had briefly talked about it in the past, but Sonny always felt that he did not know the full truth. Soul Reaper looked at him with a surprised expression. "What? Where did this come from?" He chuckled. "Just curious, that's all." Jet remained silent for a bit, then scoffed. "Well, all right, but you are really overestimating me. A special strategic asset. I wasn't even designated as a simple strategic asset. Sure, my aspect was a dangerous and unique one, but other than that, I was completely unremarkable. I was foolish, timid, and unsure of myself too. It was only later, much later, after being beaten by life over and over again, that I got rid of some of my foolishness and bloomed into this awesome and incomparably majestic figure you see in front of yourself today." Satisfied, Sonny smiled. "I guess." After a few moments of silence, he asked, "Do you regret it, though, the path that you took?" She looked away, a thoughtful expression appearing on her face. Master Jet pondered his question for a bit, then shrugged. Her voice was calm. "Ours is a bitter life, Sonny. From the outskirts of NQSC to here, it has often been bitter and only rarely sweet. A life like that, it would be a waste to make it taste more bitter still with regret. So no, I might be unsatisfied with many things, but I would never waste my time on regret." Jet looked at him and raised a brow. "Why, are you feeling regretful about something?" Sonny laughed. "Honestly, right now, I am regretting pretty much every single decision I've made in my life." She stared at him blankly, then rolled her eyes. "Well, get over it. We have a Titan to fight." And so they did. The temperature continued to plunge, and the winds grew more and more frenzied, howling through the streets of the siege capital like hungry wolves. Faster than everyone had hoped, only a few short hours later, the winter beast had reached Falcon Scott. The remains of the field army sent to the Antarctic center gathered into a formation after marching across the giant crater. The hill-like stone corpse of the fallen Titan Goliath, the pit created by the enormous explosion, and the city with millions of defenseless humans sheltering inside were now behind them. In front of them were a vast field of snow and the towering peaks of the mountains. There were around 20,000 mundane soldiers, some of them piloting the mighty war platforms, and 1,000 or so awakened gathered in front of the crater. Just like Jir had said, very few members of the First Army had used the priority right to be evacuated ahead of civilians. Most had remained, and were now preparing to face a dreadful foe. The Winter Beast. The plan of the battle was rather simple. The creature's physical body was rumored to be hidden at the heart of the blizzard, protected by hurricane winds and murderous cold. To prevent it from reaching the siege capital, the army was going to advance into the snowstorm and confront the Titan. Neither mundane soldiers nor the awakened had any hope of actually damaging a corrupted nightmare creature. Luckily, an abomination that mostly relied on unnatural powers to kill its prey could not be too formidable in a physical confrontation. The few masters who still remained with the army had a good chance of wounding, or even slaying it, if they could get close enough. The role of the soldiers and the awakened was to bury the Titan under their bodies and distract it, hopefully giving the ascended an opportunity to strike. No one knew if the plan had even a theoretical chance of working, but it was their best chance. Aside from Sunny and Jet, there were two more masters who had both survived the previous weeks of the siege and chosen to stay and fight. The four of them were spread across the formation, each commanding one of the 4 brigades. Nightmare was still slumbering because of the wounds he had received during the previous battle, but Saint, maybe due to the mantle of darkness, had already recovered. However, Sunny did not summon her yet. He wanted to keep his strongest weapon at hand in case things went wrong. If the army was unsuccessful in their desperate gamble to breach the wall of the blizzard, he would send one of his shadows ahead, to allow the taciturn knight to emerge from it near the Titan and engage the abomination in battle. That was his last resort. Even still, Sunny did not know if Saint would be able to do anything. That was the main problem. None of them knew anything for sure. The Winter Beast was just too unknown and mysterious. Chances were, every single one of them would die long before catching a glimpse of the Titan's true body. Curse that fiend! Sunny was standing in front of the brigade of grim-faced soldiers who were now under his nominal command. The members of his cohort were right behind him, and behind them were the rest of the awakened. The mundane soldiers were at the back of the column, comprising most of it. All of them were looking ahead, struggling against the cruel winds. In front of them, a cloud of snow was descending from the mountains, slowly blotting out the sky. It was like a swirling white wall was slowly erasing the world. With each second, the winds were growing stronger, and the terrible cold was becoming more unbearable. The blizzard was coming. Sunny sighed, then looked over his shoulder. Get ready. Without Kim, the members of his cohort lost the ability to borrow his sight. Each of them had summoned a luminous memory, and so had the rest of the awakened in the brigade. The mundane soldiers, too, were equipped with various light-producing devices. Beams of powerful spotlights shot into the darkness from the shoulders of the towering MWPs. The brigade appeared like a river of light in the middle of a sea of darkness. The harrowing snowstorm was getting closer and closer. Advance! Sunny took the first step forward, and the soldiers followed. The war platforms prepared their flamethrowers. Since the Titan's most fearsome weapon was cold today, these armaments were more valuable for their ability to create heat, not for their destructive potential. On both sides of the brigade, 2 more rivers of light flowed forward, one commanded by Soul Reaper Jet, one by an ascended that Sunny had met a few times, but did not really know. A few moments later, the snow was upon them. Sunny shivered, feeling a merciless chill permeate his body. Even with his elemental resistance and the help of the memory of ice, he was shocked by how ferocious the cold was. He could only imagine how terrible it was for the rest of the soldiers. It had never been the same the previous time Sonny encountered the wandering blizzard. Now that St. Tyrus was not suppressing the winter beast, it had fully unleashed its power, causing the world itself to become its tool. This snowstorm was not an aftereffect of the Titan's presence on the landmass, either. It was directly created by the frozen horror. In fact, the snowstorm itself was the horror. It was as much a part of the winter beast as the physical body hidden in the heart of the blizzard was. In that regard, the corrupted Titan was much closer to the dark sea of the Forgotten Shore than it was to a simpler creature like Goliath. For a moment, Sonny wondered if there was something hidden at the heart of the cursed sea, as well. Flamethrowers. The MWPs walking at the sides of the column extended their arms, sending long streams of fire crisscrossing above the formation. It was as though a flaming cage was created around the brigade. For a few moments, the cold receded slightly. The billowing clouds of snow were instantly melted, and drops of water rained down on the shivering humans. For as long as the war platforms had fuel to keep the flames burning, the army still had a chance to reach the depths of the unnatural snowstorm. However, they had not burned for long. It was all a gamble. A dire, dangerous, deadly gamble. The soldiers of the First Army were betting their lives against the winter beast without even knowing if they would be able to reach it, let alone hurt it. They might have made that gamble out of desperation, but they had also made it out of necessity. All of them had received a chance to leave, and all of them turned it down. Some had done it due to their sense of duty, or camaraderie, or misguided bravery. Some had simply grown numb to the horrors of the war. As for Sonny himself, he was not really sure what had led him here. He had come to this broken land in search of power, but that desirous quest seemed so childish now. Antarctica had put a lot of things in perspective, however. This shift of perspective only made things less clear instead of revealing the truth. All he knew was that he felt fiercely reluctant to leave the job unfinished, and that he did not want to fail the soldiers who had entrusted him with their lives. Sonny had never wanted to be in charge of anyone, but now that he was, their hopes and desires weighed on him like chains. Strangely, though, he did not want to refuse that burden. He felt quite protective of it. Maybe that was what Master Jet had meant when she said that no one was free in this world. Regardless of the reason, Sonny felt a frantic hope burning in his chest as he marched into the blizzard. Come on, we can do it. Behind him, the column of shivering soldiers stubbornly moved forward inside a cage of flames. The infantrymen were all encased in suits of powered armor, which were all hermetic and insulated, capable of withstanding the most hazardous environments. The awakened were all much tougher, and many of them possessed protective memories on top of that. And yet, they were all suffering from the terrifying cold. It was just too insidious, finding a way to pass through all forms of defense. Even Sonny felt miserable because of the snowstorm. Much worse, the cold was getting worse and worse the deeper into the blizzard they walked. They had to find the true body of the winter beast soon. That cold, there's something wrong about it. It doesn't feel like a natural force. Even his thoughts felt slow and frigid. But there was no way back for them now. All that Sonny could do was march forward and endure, hoping that he and his soldiers would be able to reach the heart of the blizzard. The fire produced by the MWPs helped alleviate the cold to a certain extent. But then, slowly, the heat of the furious flames started to feel less and less substantial. The flamethrowers were still spouting long streams of burning fuel, but it was as though the fire itself had been robbed of its warmth. How could fire be cold? Sonny did not know, but he felt as though the flames now contained no heat whatsoever. They were like predators that had lost all their teeth. Curse it! He glanced back, seeing a few of the mundane soldiers staggering as they walked, then gritted his teeth and continued to move forward. The snowstorm could not be too vast. They had to be getting closer to its center. All they had to do was endure a little longer. Suppressing a hint of fear, Sonny sent his shadows to scout ahead. As soon as his body lost their support, the cold assaulted it with renewed strength. He cursed quietly and concentrated on resisting the furious blows of the hurricane winds. Behind him, the awakened and the mundane soldiers were shielding their faces and leaning forward to withstand the force of the storm. Even the towering war platforms were struggling to keep their balance. They had great mass, but also a much larger surface for the wind to attack. The pilots controlled their lumbering machines with intricate skill, keeping them upright and moving forward. The shadows flew into the storm. Even though it was almost impossible to see through the raging snow, they had other ways to perceive the world. Sonny hoped that at least one of them would be able to discover the true body of the winter beast. After all, searching for it was not hard. All he had to do was follow to where the cold was most dreadful. The closer one got to the heart of the blizzard, the more terrible the unnatural cold would become. And indeed, his shadows were able to discover the right direction soon. They all failed to reach the eye of the storm, though. Sonny felt a little shaken when he realized that, further into the blizzard, even the shadows started suffering from the merciless cold. It made no sense, since shadows were incorporeal beings, but it was nevertheless true. Once they flew sufficiently deep into the snowstorm, the power of the winter beast seemed to transcend logic and reason. It was capable of freezing even those things that should have been incapable of being frozen. How can it? To his horror, Sonny realized that the frigid slowness of his thoughts was also not just in his imagination. If the corrupted Titan was capable of affecting shadows with its powers, why wouldn't it be able to affect minds? Nothing within the winter beast's snowy domain could avoid being pervaded by its power. Recalling the shadows, Sonny shuddered and continued to walk in the direction they had discovered. Every step he took felt heavier than the last. Behind him, a soldier fell to the ground. Others tried to help the soldier stand up, but it was of no use. The man was not moving. His comrades had no choice but to abandon their futile attempts. The column flowed past the motionless figure, and soon it was swallowed by the haze of the blizzard, disappearing from view. Not long after that, someone else dropped down. Sonny felt dread settle in his heart. No, we need to keep going. I refuse to give up. I refuse to believe that the abomination's power cannot be broken. He continued to walk with an ugly expression on his face, leaning low to resist the shattering wind. Soon more people fell into the snow. Sonny could feel their shadows turn lifeless in the distance. Every death cut him like a knife. It was only the mundane soldiers at first. Then one of the MWPs staggered and froze, depowering a moment later. A powerful squall crashed into it, making the towering machine sway and collapse. Eventually, even the weakest of the awakened started dying. And then the strongest of them. Engrossed by grim fearlessness and dogged determination, the brigade continued to struggle forward. The other brigades were advancing into the blizzard by its side, too. However, their rate of progress was becoming slower and slower. The closer they got to the heart of the snowstorm, the more murderous the cold became, the stronger the winds grew, and the harder it was to make even a single step forward. It felt as though an irresistible force was pushing Sonny back, and at the same time trying to sap him of his very life, battering his body with blades of wind and ice. Damn it. At first, a soldier or two would fall every minute. Then, a new body would fall into the embrace of the snow almost every second. Sonny felt a vast, maddening anguish, and a deep, biting reluctance. And fear, not for himself, but for the mission. But then he became scared for himself, too. At some point, Sonny realized that because of the diabolical cold that permeated his mind, he could no longer feel his dream realm anchor. It still existed there somewhere, but it was as though the mystical connection was distorted by a hazy wall of snow. Sonny could not sense the anchor and could not reach for it. He had nowhere to run, just like the rest of his soldiers. Are we going to lose just like that? The thought filled him with indescribable anger and grief. He could tell that they were getting closer to the heart of the blizzard. They were not too far away now. But the snowstorm had become just too calamitous. Sonny had lost count of how many soldiers he had lost. In fact, his senses, even the shadow sense, were slowly failing him. He could not see too far, and he could not perceive too far. The world had narrowed down to a hazy sphere of a dozen meters, while everything else was obscured by snow. In that sphere, there were only a few awakened. As far as he knew, everyone else might have already succumbed to the ruthless cold. Gods, it can't be like this. It can't be, damn it. In his heart, Sonny would have been able to accept if they had reached the true body of the winter beast, but failed to defeat it. But the idea of being wiped out without even making it to the eye of the storm was enough to drive him insane. Damn it, damn it, damn it all. But in the end, that was exactly what happened. Eventually, still surrounded by the wall of howling snow, Sonny realized that he could hardly make even a single step forward. He had lost sight of the brigade and did not know if any of his soldiers were still alive. There were only 3 awakened beside him: Belle, Dorn, and Samara. And with each second still, the cold was growing more harrowing. He closed his eyes. "I admit it." Sonny hesitated, staring into the blizzard. "Admit it, you lost." He shivered. "You fool, what else did you expect would happen?" It was almost as if the sin of solace was talking to him. But no, those were only his own thoughts. He had not even summoned the jade sword yet. His own thoughts were much more damning. Sonny let out a soft sigh, then turned around and looked at his soldiers. The members of his cohort were standing close to each other, bits of ice covering their hair. Their luminous memories had grown dim and weak, and their lips were blue. Their eyes, however, were much more calm than his own. Sonny studied their faces for a few moments, trying to come up with a solid thought. Eventually, he simply whispered, "I'm sorry." Bell smiled with the corner of his mouth, then slightly shook his head. That action alone seemed to take something out of him, and the swordsman swayed slightly. Samara reached out to support him, and he placed a hand on her shoulder, gripping it tightly. Dorn struggled a little and turned to face them. He gave his fellow awakened a warm nod, then kept looking at them without saying anything. Maybe he couldn't. Sonny remained motionless, watching. He watched them slowly grow still. And then he watched as the spark of life was gradually extinguished inside them. Samara was first, and then Dorn. Bell was the last to go. Only when their shadows had turned lifeless and empty did Sonny allow himself to dissipate into the darkness, escaping the murderous cold. In the embrace of the shadows, the power of the winter beast was not nearly as overwhelming. It could still reach here somehow, but in a weakened state. Sonny howled with sorrow and fury as he flew deeper into the blizzard. Even if everything was lost, he still wanted to try and reach the wretched abomination. He wanted to hurt, break, and kill it. But he failed. Even if the cold was not as terrifying in the shadows, it was still there. And the closer Sonny got to the heart of the blizzard, the more annihilating the cold became. He still persisted forward, feeling his very soul freeze and start to grow still, dying for a time. He almost made it. Eventually, though, Sonny had to turn back. He ran away. He ran away and hid himself, waiting for the snowstorm to pass. He survived. The winter beast came. And then it left. The last citadel of humanity in the Antarctic center, Falcon Scott, had fallen to the chain of nightmares. The harrowing blizzard had swept through it, freezing the whole city solid and killing everyone inside. Sonny had heard that a long time ago, during the dark times, or maybe even before that, the whole of Antarctica was covered by ice. It had been a land of perpetual winter, cold and snow. After the corrupted Titan wiped out the last human settlement and retreated back into the mountains, as if satisfied to be the sole sovereign of the region, the landscape looked just like that again. The city was drowning in snow. The buildings emerged from it encased in ice. Below the cliffs, a large swath of the ocean was frozen as well. A gargantuan battleship was stuck in the ice, still anchored, the people aboard it all dead. Everyone was dead. Except for Sonny. His soldiers were dead. Millions of civilians were dead. Professor Obel was dead too, but he was alive and not even wounded. Sonny had remained in the shadows for a long time, only emerging from them after his essence almost ran dry. And now he was digging a grave. The earth itself was frozen solid, so his task was not an easy one. He had to summon the sin of solace and use the beautiful jade blade to dig. Sonny was standing in a shallow pit, deepening it. His movements were fast and purposeful. Angry tears were streaming down his face, turning into ice before falling to the ground. He was not alone either. A vague shape that looked a lot like him was sitting on the edge of the pit, staring at him somberly. It had his voice, too. "Look at you go." Sonny gritted his teeth, ignoring the sin of solace. The cursed sword remained silent for a while, observing him. Eventually it asked, "So did you find it, conviction, or whatever it was you've been searching for?" Sonny spared the vague shape a glance, then continued digging. No, I didn't find crap." He wiped his face with an elbow. "Actually, that's not true. I did find something. I found out that I was right all along." Sonny plunged the sword into the frozen soil and laughed. "Faith, calling, conviction, all those lofty words, it's all rubbish, it's all meaningless. People like Anvil of Valor and Kai Song have conviction, and that conviction helps them achieve greatness. Well, where are they? What good did it do? Where the hell were they, huh?" He lowered the sword and stared at the vague shape with fury in his eyes. "Those great people go around playing with their great conviction, while little people like us suffer and lose our little lives. But what's wrong with having small dreams? All I ever wanted was to live a good life and keep people I care about safe. What's wrong about that? Why do I have to have a great goal and soaring ambition to be allowed to exist?" Sonny remained motionless for a moment, then returned to digging. "I'll tell you why. It's because those bastards made it so. That's the world they have built. They can pursue their convictions and trample on millions in the process because there's no one to hold them responsible. They can have their little wars while ignoring the death toll, no matter how much people die. Hate it. I hate it." Suddenly he stopped and then let out a small laugh. "Effie, she was wrong. Well, I can't blame her. She doesn't know Nephi's as well as I do. From the outside, it might really look like Neph draws power from conviction. And she does, too. But the truth is so much simpler. I mean, she told me herself. Back on the Forgotten Shore, years ago, Sonny had asked Nephi's why she wanted to destroy the spell. And her answer was very simple indeed. Because I hate it. Because she hated it. She was going to destroy the spell because she wanted to. And she wanted to destroy the spell because she hated it. That was all." Sonny laughed again, then shook his head. "Fool, I'm such a fool." The vague shape sitting on the edge of the grave grinned. "Well, at least we agree on something." Sonny continued to dig, thinking back on the past months. He had not found conviction, but in a sense he also did. "I don't need it. I know what I value and I know what I want. It might not be much, but it's enough. I am who I am, and who I am is enough. It's plenty." He looked at the vague shape and made it disappear with a thought. Then Sonny climbed out of the grave and looked at it. There were 3 graves beside that one. They all stared at Sonny like monuments to his failure. Slowly, he turned to the 4 corpses that lay on the ground a small distance away from the graves. After the winter beast left, he had returned to collect the bodies of Belle, Dorn, and Samara. And then, not too far away, he had found the body of Master Jet as well. Master Jet. Sunny couldn't quite comprehend the fact that she was dead. She had always been there for him. She had been the first person to meet him after the first nightmare, and the one to guide him to the academy. She had been there when he returned from the Forgotten Shore, and from the Kingdom of Hope, too. She had even helped him purchase his home. Soul Reaper had been his mentor, comrade, and friend. For him, she was synonymous with competence and power, and perseverance. If a girl from the outskirts could rise so high, then why couldn't he? And now she was dead. Sunny couldn't believe it, but there was no denying it. Her lifeless body was right there in front of him, unmoving and still. Her beautiful blue eyes were now glassy and hollow. Her lips were never going to curve into a smile again. Soul Reaper Jet was gone. Sunny's heart was empty. Right. He remained motionless for a while, then walked over to Belle and carried him to the first grave. Then, silently, he repeated the same process with Samara and Dorn. Master Jet was the last, but he couldn't bring himself to approach her body for a long time. Eventually, though, it had to be done. Feeling as though he was dead himself, Sunny approached Jet's corpse, then leaned down to grab it. The corpse stared at him with glassy eyes and said hoarsely, "Kindly unhand me." Sunny sighed. "Don't worry, Master Jet. I am going to bury you well. There are no nightmare creatures around yet, but they will come eventually. You wouldn't want to be eaten, would you? I surely don't." The corpse remained silent for a few moments. "Have you lost your mind, Sunny? Put me the hell down." He nodded. Yes, I did lose my mind a little, that's true." The corpse of Soul Reaper Jet continued to stare at him. "I should probably close her eyes." "Do you need me to slap you again? Snap out of it, damn it." A small frown appeared on Sunny's face. Then he suddenly dropped the corpse and flinched back, falling on his butt. "Wah, what? Master Jet, you're alive." The corpse remained motionless on the ground. After a short pause, it said in a dull, hoarse, corpsely voice, "No, I am dead." Sunny stared at it, dumbfounded. Suddenly the corpse let out a grating, hissing sound. It was trying to laugh. "I've been dead this whole time. It's my flaw. You are dead. But as long as I keep killing things and absorbing their essence, I can at least maintain a semblance of life. If I don't, I'll be truly destroyed." She struggled to turn her head and looked at him with dead, glassy eyes. "That was the real reason I joined the government all those years ago. I knew that I'd always have things to kill if I did. Now, Sunny, arg, damn it, can you help me sit up?" He slowly rose to his feet, took a few shaky steps forward, and pulled her up to a sitting position. Then he blinked a couple of times and said, "So, that was why you told me that it's impossible for you to die in Antarctica, because you were never alive to begin with." Soul Reaper struggled for a few moments, and then took a labored breath, the first one since he had found her in the snowfield outside the city. Yes, it was a figure of speech. Both of them remained quiet for a while, not knowing what to say. Then Jet suddenly turned her head. Her eyes glistened a little. "Sunny, look there." He turned around, not knowing what she wanted him to see. Nothing seemed to have changed. The graves, the snow, the frozen buildings of the destroyed city were all the same. However, far away, a thin line of pale lilac appeared above the horizon, breaking the rain of cold darkness. Soul Reaper tried to smile, but failed. The sun is rising. The night, it's over. End of Volume 5, Dread Night. Sunny, come here. I'll only kill you a little. Get the hell away from me, you demented zombie. Sunny took a few steps back, easily avoiding the grasp of the shambling corpse of Master Jet. Fortunately, she was not too fast. In fact, she could barely crawl. Her nails powerlessly scratched against the alloy, and Soul Reaper let out a hoarse, disappointed hiss. "Damn it!" Sonny shook his head. Despite Jet's weakened state, avoiding her clutches was a tiresome task, mostly because there was nowhere really for him to run. Currently, the two of them were trapped on an alloy raft that was drifting slowly across the strait between the Antarctic center and the vast landmass to the east. When Jet lost control of herself, all Sonny could do was endlessly circle the raft and wait for her to come to her senses. "Come here, Sonny, I won't bite." He gave her a dark look, then picked up his chair, walked over to the other end of their improvised vessel, and calmly sat down. The length of the raft was no more than 10 meters, but for Soul Reaper, that was a vast distance right now. She stared at him for a while, then gave up and rolled on her back with a curse, looking at the sky with a resigned expression. When Jet remained still, she really looked like a corpse, and technically she was, but at least in this cold she was not a rotting corpse. One had to count their blessings. Unlike the souls of all awakened, hers was not able to generate essence on its own. Worse than that, her soul core was shattered and constantly leaked what little essence she had left. Once the essence completely ran out, Soul Reaper would truly and forever perish. The only way for her to survive was to continuously kill living beings and absorb their soul essence. That was actually Jet's sleeper ability. Her awakened ability allowed her to bypass all forms of physical defense and strike directly at the souls of her enemies, which was where her fearsome nickname, Soul Reaper, had come from. Her ascended ability was to slowly absorb shards of broken soul cores from those she had killed to build up and strengthen her own, both in terms of size and capacity. It also removed the natural limit of essence infusion that the flesh of most living beings had, allowing Jet to oversaturate her body with essence and achieve truly superb levels of strength, speed, and resilience. Hers was a supreme aspect. Sadly, right now, Jet had no essence to spare on strengthening her body. She barely had enough to keep it from collapsing entirely, and even that last reserve was slowly running out. Things had not gone well for them after the destruction of Falcon Scott. Even after the winter beast retreated into the depths of the Antarctic center, its dire influence remained. Neither Sonny nor Jet had been able to access their dream realm anchors, which meant that they could not escape from the waking world. Eventually, the two of them had been left with only one choice: to try and brave the strait. Actually, there was no need for them to even reach East Antarctica. All they had to do was sail far enough into the ocean to leave the area of influence of the corrupted Titan, which would allow both to return to the dream realm. That would still be dangerous, but not as dangerous as remaining in the winter beast's frozen realm. There were no ships coming, and no seaworthy vessels left intact in Falcon Scott. In the end, Sonny had been forced to improvise. The alloy raft they were currently drifting on was not just a random sheet of light alloy. It was actually the covetous coffer. That memory of his possessed an enchantment called Mendacious Coffer, which allowed it to mimic the forms of inanimate objects. Additionally, the size and intricacy of the simulacrum were dependent on Sonny's shadow core capacity. By now, he was very close to becoming an ascended tyrant, so obviously that capacity was much greater than when he had first acquired the coffer. So Sonny had turned it into a raft. It was much larger than the alloy chest the coffer usually looked like, at the expense of the complexity. Even better, the locomotive chiffonier enchantment allowed the raft to propel itself forward at a modest speed. Most importantly, though, the covetous coffer was an ascended memory of the fourth tier, and as such, it was tremendously more durable than even the strongest alloy would have been. If something attacked them from below, which had already happened a few times, the raft was not going to be destroyed unless the attacking nightmare creature happened to be truly terrifying. Sonny and Jet had ventured into the strait on top of the covetous coffer, hoping to leave the winter beast's area of influence in about a day. And they had. Sadly, their situation did not really improve after that. As it turned out, there were numerous nightmare gates hidden below the cold waters of the ocean here. Perhaps there were too many, or perhaps their luck had just been truly atrocious. But even now, a week later, Sunny and Jet had yet to encounter a place where the call of nightmare would not instantly whisk them away if they tried to leave for the dream realm. At this point, it would be easier for them to actually reach East Antarctica. They had made it 2/3 of the way already. The mighty battleships of the government fleet were able to make the trip in a day or two, but the covetous coffer was much slower, so it was going to take them a few more days to make landfall. Sunny did not feel too much pressure. Saint was standing guard with Morgan's warbow in her hands, warding off most of the sea creatures. Sunny and Saint were capable of dealing with almost every normal threat. If something they could not deal with were to attack from the depths, he could use a combination of memories to take flight. If they were attacked in the skis, he could dive deep into the ocean. The only problem he had was that Jet would periodically lose her mind and half-heartedly try to kill him. Sitting in his luxurious chair, Sunny threw a look at Soul Reaper's unmoving corpse and sighed. Damnation! Sunny was not too worried about being able to reach East Antarctica. Unless something truly harrowing rose from the depths of the ocean to devour them, he was certain of his ability to either kill or escape it. However, he was worried about Jet. A week ago, she had been weak, but not nearly as weak as she was now. Her mental state was also getting worse. He knew that Soul Reaper had been intentionally starving her body of essence in order to conserve as much of it as possible, but still. Sunny did not know how much longer she would last. Right now, she was not even able to afford summoning a memory. Every drop of essence counted, and there was very little of it left in her shattered soul core, which presented a problem. Saint was capable of killing most nightmare creatures that attacked them with her bow, and Sunny was not far behind her in terms of lethality. However, Jet was in no condition to kill anything. But despite that, as he considered his options, the corpse stirred, then started laboriously crawling in his direction again, demented lights burning in its glassy blue eyes. "Come here, come here." Sunny stared at her with distaste, then shook his head and stood up. His shadow sense spread outward, encompassing as much of the world as he could perceive. He remained motionless for a while, allowing the corpse to draw dangerously close. Jet's hollow eyes glinted. "Got you." Before she could grab his shin, however, Sunny sighed and dove off the edge of the raft, disappearing under the cold water. The graceless dusk dissipated into dancing threads of black silk. Jet seemed startled by his disappearance. She fruitlessly clawed at the surface of the raft a couple of times, then grew still. "He's gone." A hoarse sigh escaped from her bluish lips. She didn't inhale after that. By now, even breathing was a chore. She didn't really need to anyway. The corpse remained motionless for a long time. Eventually, a black bird landed on the raft, hopped over to the corpse and stared at it curiously. A few moments later, the crow tried to peck one of the glassy eyes out. Jet blinked. "You stop that, crow, crow, or I'm going to make you into a soup." The bird hurriedly jumped away, seemingly nervous. "Soup, soup." Its voice sounded indignant. Soul Reaper looked at the bird silently, then rasped, "Did you find land?" The crow spread its wings and waved them a couple of times. "Land, land." The corpse tried to smile, which looked quite disturbing. Even Saint spared it an indifferent glance. "How far is it?" The bird ruffled its feathers and made another hop back. "Far, far." Jet gritted her teeth. "I know that it's far, you stupid bird. How far?" The echo simply stared at her in confusion. After a couple of seconds, it cawed proudly. How? Soul Reaper hissed, then hit her head against the alloy surface of the raft a couple of times. "Got him it." After that small outburst, she didn't say anything else, remaining still and unmoving. The raft swayed gently on the waves. Below the raft, hundreds of small metallic feet were furiously paddling the cold water. On top of it, a living statue, a talking corpse, and a small black bird were silently waiting. Some time later, the water behind the raft suddenly boiled, and a young man with silky black hair and alabaster skin emerged from it, dragging something in a stranglehold. A terrifying creature with long tentacles that were as wide as a man's thigh was struggling furiously, trying to free itself. Its spongy flesh was awash with inky black blood. "Stop fighting, you bastard!" Sonny gritted his teeth and ignored a tentacle that was wrapped around his neck, exerting enough pressure on it to crush an armored vehicle. Using one hand, he swam toward the raft, climbed aboard, and dragged the nightmare creature with him. Saint silently moved to the opposite side of the coffer, so that the weight of the abomination did not make it capsize. The crow flew up and landed on her shoulder, staring at the monstrous creature with apprehension. Sonny pressed the abomination down and barked. "Stay still." He was rather angry. Yes, he and Saint were enough to slay most of the nightmare creatures that would attack them, either from underwater or from the sky. However, capturing one alive, that was a whole different level of trouble. "Jet, get over here." Soul Reaper slowly gathered her limbs and then sluggishly tried to stand up. After a few tries, she succeeded and stood there for a moment, swaying. Sonny summoned the cruel sight and tossed it to her, using his knee to press the abomination into the alloy. Soul Reaper caught the spear and used its shaft to help herself stay upright. He held the nightmare creature down and cursed. "Hurry the hell up, this thing is really strong." Not to mention that it had more limbs than he did. Immobilizing it was a miserable task. Jet shambled over, then spun the somber spear and thrust it into the center of the mass of furiously dancing tentacles, using the whole weight of her body to give the strike some force. The silver blade pierced the flesh of the abomination and disappeared inside, causing a river of black blood to flow onto the alloy surface of the raft. The corpse of Soul Reaper lost balance and fell flat into the puddle of blood. She remained laying there, not paying the convulsing tentacles any attention. Slowly, an eerie smile of satisfaction appeared on the dead body's blood-stained face. "Ah, that feels better." Sonny let go of the slain creature and sent it back into the water with a furious kick. Saint moved back to the middle of the raft, balancing it with her prodigious weight. The crow slid off her shoulder and landed at the edge of the pool of black blood. It stared at it for a moment, and then cawed excitedly. "Soup, soup." Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story. And if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down. Our target is to get 1K subscriber. There will be surprise for all of you. Stay tuned.